But some of our NGOs, like churches that represent the excluded, the National Union of the Unemployed, our farmers, our construction industry, they're the stakeholders, and the senior public servants. And under the Prime Minister's office, that group has carried out continuous reviews of different aspects of the problems in our society and published the reviews. The government receives the reviews and gives a view on them, but the government doesn't give to the council the sort of full authority. It doesn't say you're right or you're wrong. You're wrong. It says thank you for your information, and we will see what we can do with it. But what the council did was grow a shared understanding, a national consensus where people understood what the problems were. The trade unions got a much deeper understanding of the true challenges of our industries. Our industries got a much deeper understanding of the true interest set of our trade unions. And collectively they realised that this led up to our crisis in '87, that trade unions winning a 20% nominal wage increase for their membership was useless if inflation was 25% and if taxation had to go up to pay for the debt burden. So those people interested in the unions, who were interested in the reality for their members, came to understand, and that's, that there was a higher order solution required here to ensure that their members benefited. The employers began to get a deeper understanding of the importance of intellectual and labour capital, and training and upgrading how the labour force performed to produce much higher productivity, to produce higher profits, and that required investment from employers. I said they had done a shared analysis of problems. They had built a trust over the years by working together. And then out of that we started producing agreements, 3-year agreements. Up to '87, Irish labour relations were strikes, more strikes, huge increases nominally in wages, and then massive inflation. We lost horrendous numbers of days in strikes all through the '80s. After '87, we had our agreements, and within our agreements there was a wage bargain. The wage bargain wasn't the dominant issue, but it was an essential issue. But there were lots of other pieces, and government was important as part of those other pieces. But that took strikes off the table. Workers and employers started concentrating on working together, not labour versus capital, but labour and capital working together to trade globally to produce wealth. Trading globally was an essential attitudinal aspect of how we transformed. So we had agreements that were born out of a burning platform, and a lot of work gone into developing a consensus of what needed to be done. Our fiscal policy was around expenditure, and one of the big things we did in '87, and Minister, I know it's an area that you would be interested in, and I know the unions would be. There was a strong view, and the reality is an awful lot of our expenditure was spent on the size of our public sector. A huge amount of our deficit was occasioned by the size of our public service and the amount of money we paid. We didn't sack anybody, but we introduced a wage ban, a sort of a wage increase freeze. We also introduced a freeze on hiring. And for a few years, only one person out of every 3 resignations was filled. And it was totally arbitrary. It was totally rule-based. There was no capacity for movement. If I, as Secretary General, happened to be one of the other 2, my post was gone. My department would probably have to have been merged at the time. The minister just wouldn't listen to special pleading. Nobody got away with it. And we sweated down our public service. We also had a career break. In other words, civil servants were invited to go off and leave the service for 1 to 5 years on the promise that their job was there for them when they wanted to come back. Some of them emigrated, some of them set up new companies, some of them joined the private sector. And that's helped sweat down the numbers. And the third thing we did was we introduced voluntary early retirement. In our agreement on taxation, like we were asking the trade unions to accept wage freezes. Well, the employers weren't going to have to pay them, so is that a fair bargain? And in ways it wasn't a fair bargain, and if it was just between the 2 of them we wouldn't have achieved anything. But government could come in and say, look, we're doing this, but government, because we're going to reduce the deficit, government will start reducing personal income tax. And our personal income tax rates were 35% at the lowest level and 60% at the highest level. So government could participate in the bargain. Where we wanted the employers to give a bit more, government and the unions might have wanted retooling grants or more investment in capital. Government gave them accelerated depreciation allowances, so they could, from corporate tax base, they could reduce the corporate tax payments by investing more in capital. So we provided, the government provided different parties some extra icing on the cake to make it palatable. But our social partnership had other elements which I'll talk about in a minute. Consumption taxes went up, and in Ireland our company tax, we used to have a 10% rate and a 50% rate after joining the union. We reduced that to a single rate of 12.5%. And that, our learning from it is that a small slice, 12.5%, 1/8 of a huge cake, is a lot more remunerative, is much better than 50% of a small bun. And our yield from company taxation has gone up year on year continuously since we introduced our single rate of corporate tax. It encouraged more people to do more activity, to invest more, and to stop spending all of that money on fancy accountants trying to reduce the tax bill. It's also attracted lots of industry from outside of Ireland to come to locate in Ireland and to sell into the European Union and other parts of the globe from Ireland to occasion the profits within our jurisdiction. And so Pfizer comes along. I said they do Viagra for export only. They make a lot of money and we get an eighth of it. You know, and if we had a 50% tax rate, they wouldn't come to Ireland to produce. So we're not sacrificing something, it is illusory. And the wonderful thing is that our trade unions didn't fight this at all. And they sold it to their membership. And what did they get from it? They got lots more, deeper, richer employments. And then our capital taxation, we had a Minister for Finance in the 90s, we have a capital gains tax rate, it's 40%. The Minister halved the capital gains tax rate from 40 to 20%. His officials demanded, his budget speech, this was ridiculous, but they demanded it, to put down a 10 million cost of halving the capital tax rate. The capital tax yield trebled the following year. Because people said, you know, there's no point holding on to these assets. I should sell them, I'll pay 20%. That's a fair rate of tax, and it produces a liquidity in the marketplace. Our national finances were corrected. And then EMU rules, the European Union, the monetary union, the euro. One of my observations here, and the reason why I put it up here, is that Ireland fixed its finances for selfish reasons. We fixed them because we as a people didn't want to mortgage our children's future. We wanted to reject debt as a way of building our country. It is not right to take your children's money and spend it today. So that was our decision. Unfortunately, the European Union comes along and has the same rules. And then we start saying, why are we balancing our budget? Well, we're not doing it for our own reason. We're doing it because Europe told us to do it. And it's very bad sometimes. It's short-term, politically, it's a great thing to do. In the long term, what you do is people start then trying to attack the EMU rules and say, look, if we can get around the rule this way or that way. Irish people are great. If there's a rule there, we try to find a way around it. I think that maybe you share some of those characteristics here as well. But it is much more important to internalise them than to externalise them, it seems to me. Education is what my parents and my parents' parents and all the parents in Ireland gave to us as a people. An understanding that the way out of poverty was through education. This is perhaps one of the deepest and most important explanatory pieces for what has changed in our country. So, even in the 60s, we went to free second-level education. Everybody was encouraged to participate. And even in the 70s and 80s, we were getting 85% attainment, second level, senior high. And at senior high, we study 7 subjects. We do business, we do science, we do mathematics, we do language. We try to produce a very rounded workforce, and a workforce that is able to learn continuously. Not a workforce that's been at 14 or 15 corralled into a very narrow job that might die in the future.